Today I want to talk about Sukkot, or the Feast of Tabernacles, which is a week-long holiday that really is a celebration for two main things. The first is that it is the harvest season in the land of Israel, and the second is the holiday is a reminder or commemorating how God protected the Jewish people while we were in the desert for 40 years. Essentially, while the Jewish people spent these 40 years wandering in the desert, the Jewish people dwelled in sort of tents, booths, whatever you'd like to call them, but they had no permanent dwellings or structure. And additionally, God's presence rested over the tabernacle, which was also a tent of sorts. And what's amazing about it is that the Jews really had no protection from elements. It could rain, it could be, windy sandstorms, whatever it happened to be, they didn't have that much protection from it. They didn't have much protection from, their enemies. They really had to rely on God's protection while they had these sort of flimsy housing units. And God didn't fail them. God protected them and took care of them and brought them safely to the land of Israel. And so, as sort of a reminder of this, what we do during Sukkot is that we leave the comfort of our homes, and for those of us who have backyards, we will build a sukkah, which is a three-sided, at least three-sided, usually it's four-sided, but at least a three-sided structure that's kind of like a tent or a booth, and it has the roof is usually made of bamboo and like palm branches or different types of branches, but you have to be able to still see the stars in the sky. So again, not exactly what we usually have in our homes, but we sort of move into the sukkahs for a week. When the weather permits, we will eat our meals in the sukkah, 3 times a day, or our snacks in the sukkah. And some people even have the custom to sleep in their sukkah, but you kind of treat it like a new home. So you can go out there and you can do some reading or you can do some work. It's this dwelling place that is a reminder of God's protection to us, because things haven't changed that much. Even in our homes where we feel secure, God is really the one who's protecting us and looking out for us. We can put as many locks on our doors and bars on our window as we want, but we need God's protection in order to keep us safe. So that's sort of the essence of why we have these sukkahs that we live in for a week. And the holiday of Sukkot is broken up into 3 parts. There is the first 2 days, which are kind of like Shabbat. You refrain from doing work, you refrain from sort of all these other activities that you do on Shabbat, and you take them to be 2 days of rest. There are what's called the intermediary days, or Chol HaMoed, which are, the days where you can go about your normal activities. You can go back to work, go back to school, whatever it happens to be, but it's still the holiday, and you still will come back and eat in the sukkah. And there are the last 2 days, which are Shmini Atzeret and Simchat Torah. Now, Simchat Torah is an amazing holiday, and I will talk about it a little bit more when I talk about next week's Parsha, which is Vizot HaBracha, but during Simchat Torah, we finish the annual Torah reading cycle. So basically, it takes an entire Jewish calendar year to go through from Genesis until the end of Deuteronomy. So reading the entire Torah. It takes a year to do that. And at the end, it is a huge celebration on Simchat Torah, where we dance with the Torah and everybody's together and really excited about it. And we begin reading the Torah again from Bereshit, because really we're never finished with the Torah. Also, over the course of Sukkot, God determines the amount of rain that's going to fall for the next year. And that's really important, because if you think about Sukkot as the harvest festival, going back to that first explanation, celebrating the Jews being able to gather their crops in the land of Israel, rain is essential for the harvest. If you don't have enough rain, or if the land floods, or if the rain doesn't fall at the right time, your entire crop for that year, or maybe even for longer, is ruined. And so it's a really nice time to take the time and pray for rain to come in the right amounts at the right time. Now, something else that we do over Sukkot is that we shake the lulav and the etrog. So the lulav and the etrog are these 4 different types of vegetation. So I'm going to explain what they are. I wrote down what they are sort of translated to in English, not that it helps very much, but the lulav is a palm branch. The etrog is a citron. It looks like a very large lemon. There's also 2 aravot, which is willow twigs, and at least 3 hadassim, which are myrtle twigs. And the citron, the etrog, is left to the side, but those 3 sort of types of branches are bundled together. And there's a whole lot of symbolism surrounding these branches. And what we do with the bundle is we shake them in different directions. We shake them up, we shake them down, we shake them left, we shake them right, we shake them forward and backwards. We shake them in all 6 directions, and we make a blessing over them. Now, there's a lot of symbolism behind the lulav and the etrog, and a lot of people will compare this sort of bunch of 4 types of vegetation to the Jewish people, because the Jewish people are built up of all different types of people. The way that the commentators describe it is that there are people who study Torah, and there are people who study Torah and do good deeds. They do mitzvahs. There are people who study the Torah but don't do mitzvahs. There are people who just do mitzvahs and don't study the Torah. And there are people who don't do anything at all. So that's what the commentators suggest, that it's representing the different types of Jewish ways of observance and how all are important and all are connected. But to further the idea a little bit, in taking it away from just Torah observance, really, Jews, there's no just like one type of Jew. Judaism is very diverse, and you'll have people of all different walks of life and experiences, and people choose to practice in so many different ways. And after the high holidays, when we came together, or at least most years we come together in sort of large gatherings as a community, and we spend time together, we don't want to have sort of that letdown once the sort of New Year holidays are over, that letdown of like being without people or going back to our separate normal lives. It's a really beautiful thing, Sukkot, because it keeps people together a little bit longer, and it reminds us how important it is to be with other Jewish people. And additionally, I think it's so important to remember that Jews come in all shapes and sizes, so to speak, because oftentimes, at least if you live in like an insular community and you only see people who practice and choose to live in the same way that you do, you don't really think about the other types of Jews. But there are so many Jews in the world, and each individual Jew is so important, and there's not one who's better than the other. We are all God's children, God's chosen people, and we have to treat each other as such. And so when we look at the lulav and the etrog, you have these 4 very different types of species coming together. And I think that's sort of a message, a takeaway for ourselves, that we shouldn't sort of isolate ourselves to just the type that is like us. We need to be together and be unified with all types of Jews. And I think that's something really beautiful and really important that we need to take away from Sukkot. And so this Sukkot, whether you have a sukkah or whether you don't have a sukkah, maybe try and reach out to other Jewish people. We all know people who are Jewish but we're not close to, or we can find people other Jews. We can sort of seek other Jewish people and try to befriend them and try to be close to them and try to learn from them. Whether they know more about Judaism than you do or whether they know less about Judaism than you do, they have something to teach and to share as well. And so I wish you all a wonderful Sukkot. May it be filled with a lot of happiness, enjoyment, and togetherness. And I look forward to speaking with you next week.